which came out on the PlayStation 1. I believe it was um, one of the very first games to ever, or role-playing games to come out on the PlayStation 1. And this was a game that kind of escaped me. It was a game that, I would hear about kind of very in small doses. When the Nintendo 64 came out and you also had the PlayStation 1, I went with the Nintendo 64 because I had a NES, I had a Super NES, I had a Game Boy, had all the Nintendo systems, so it made sense for me to get the 64. Um, but then I was very disappointed because a lot of the role playing games I like to play, there is very few on the Nintendo 64, and they were all over on Sony's platform. So that really bothered me a little bit because I really wanted to play those games and really see how those games stacked up. Um, but one of the cool things that I saw, but one of the cool things that I wanted to look at was just how bothered me a little bit because I was just how people would always talk about Final Fantasy VII. And I can remember sitting at the lunch table and there was a guy who goes, "Oh, well, Suikoden's good too." And it's like, well, what's Suikoden? Never heard of it. So then it wasn't until I had my PlayStation 2 where I got to play Suikoden 3, 4, and 5 and absolutely love those games. Had my PlayStation 3 and one of the was able to download the first Suikoden and I played it for probably about 5 minutes before my PlayStation 3 kind of went and it broke. Um, so I probably only played about 15 minutes of this game. But because I've really enjoyed 3, 4, and 5, never played 2, even though I own the disc copy of 2 because before digital distribution, like that was a rare find. And I think I paid the low end of that. I think I paid like $80 for that game, whereas some places you could pay up to $250 for Suikoden 2. Um, but it was one of those games where I really liked it, so I want to kind of go back to the roots and try to beat this game, so then I can kind of understand and kind of where it came from, um, kind of how the older one stacked up to the first one. But then even just kind of talk about the disappointment of how there hasn't been a Suikoden game since the PlayStation 2 era. And I've looked around on Wikipedia, I've looked around on Suikoden fan sites, I've even watched YouTube videos, and it just seems like that it's a series that just kind of faded away. And especially since I think Konami still owns the rights, so that's kind of problematic, especially if you listen to my discussion on Konami when I talked about them during the Metal Gear Solid 5 play.